name is Chris, and I'm documenting my journey as I study the natural sciences in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, what exactly is a glacier anyway, aside from an excuse to upcharge bottled water?
This summer, I was hired by a couple of researchers who are studying a bird that plants forests of endangered trees. So let me take you into the mountains, we'll do some field research, and I'll tell you the story of the bird and the tree. This tree is the whitebark pine. It's an emblem of resilience and persistence. Whitebark pines easily live for hundreds of years, the oldest being almost 1,300 years old, poking its first shoots above the soil centuries before the Crusades. There are no videos or even pictures of that tree available to the public, presumably for its protection. So, we've hiked 17 miles and 7,000 feet today to show you this older specimen, because I want you to see what a truly ancient whitebark pine can look like. While it's impossible to know for sure without physically coring the tree and counting those rings, I know for a fact that it takes centuries for a whitebark pine to look like this. And this tree could well be almost 1,000 years old. They come in all shapes and sizes, from grand multi-trunk stands like this, to low, bushy, and voluminous, to decidedly smaller, but with plenty of room to grow. When it comes to judging age, size can be pretty deceiving, especially up here, where conditions slow growth to a snail's pace. A whitebark pine that looks like this could easily be older than the oldest human being on the planet. Now enter the bird. The Clark's nutcracker is a bird in the corvid family, like ravens and crows. Only nutcrackers live in the harsh mountainous regions of the western US. They're tough, they're smart, and they have complex social systems that we humans don't even understand. While nutcrackers are by no means rare, their elusive behavior makes them difficult to study, photograph, and film.
So I've been trying to film nutcrackers this whole time, not having much luck, and then this morning I wake up to a dead camera battery and a whole bunch of nutcrackers doing the most photogenic stuff I've seen. I'm unofficially renaming them to Chris's Ball Busters.
The Clark's nutcrackers are a species of mischief and mystery. Let me give you an example. While other birds pack their bags and head for warmer climates during the winter, nutcrackers can stay put even as the mountains turn blisteringly cold and food sources all but disappear. These cold temperatures actually increase the metabolic needs of the bird. What I mean by that is the nutcrackers have to eat even more than normal just to stay warm, and yet food is as scarce as it will be all year. And on top of that, this is when they start breeding, introducing even more little mouths to feed. Something doesn't make sense about this. Whitebark pines don't make much sense either. Specifically, their cones and seeds are bizarre. What cones are is they're protective structures for seeds, and in most pines except the whitebark, they'll open when conditions are right to release winged seeds that catch the wind. Some say you can predict the weather with pine cones because they open when it's dry, favorable conditions for a seed to fly to a new place, and then close back up again when humidity goes up. But here's where whitebark pine cones are weird. They don't open. They can't open. And even if they could, their seeds are big, heavy, and totally wingless. They would fall right out of the tree onto the ground in a shaded, inhospitable place at the base of the original tree. They can't disperse. And yet you can find them in the northern mountains of British Columbia, in the Rockies in the western US, the Cascades, and all the way down to the Sierra Nevadas in California. The chosen homes of whitebark pines and Clark's nutcrackers are only possible because they have a secret. And that secret is each other. In late summer, when the whitebark pine cones are out, the nutcrackers go to work. Using their specialized hooked beaks, they're able to pry apart the scales of the solid whitebark pine cones to get to the nutritious seeds inside. Some of those seeds they'll eat, but many more will be stored in underground caches for winter when they need those seeds to feed their young. So that's how the nutcrackers make it through the winter. They make their own abundance of food by stashing it away during the summer and the fall. When I read this statistic, it blew my mind. A singular Clark's nutcracker in a big cone year can bury as many as 98,000 whitebark pine seeds. That is almost 100,000 seeds. You might be thinking, that's a lot to carry. Luckily, The Nutcracker is biologically adapted to this task with a pouch that opens just below their tongue called a sublingual pouch. Only Nutcrackers have this pouch, and it can store up to 80 whitebark pine seeds at a time. Now, this near 100,000 seeds will be spread across around 30,000 caches. That is a lot to remember. This is where the Nutcracker's brilliant mind comes into play. After burying the seeds, which they may do a few yards away or a few miles away from the original tree, they fly up to a number of different locations, apparently triangulating the relationships between landmarks in their stash, because they may not be back for as long as 10 months. I don't know about you, I still use Google Maps to navigate to my favorite restaurants, and the Nutcracker is navigating to tens of thousands of caches, buried under snow sometimes, on brain cells alone. Naturally, they won't come back for all 30,000. They leave about 20%, and it's those unclaimed caches that become the whitebark pine forests of the future. So when you put that into context, what that means is that nearly every whitebark pine in every whitebark pine forest represents a place, be it 5 years or 500 years ago, that a Nutcracker dug a hole and popped a seed inside. The huge, wingless but nutritious seeds of the whitebark pine are therefore a beautiful adaptation with a double-edged purpose. Those immense stores of energy are what have convinced the Nutcracker over maybe millions of years to rely on and bury the seeds of the whitebark pine. But those extra stores of energy also help the whitebark get established in rocky, nutrient-poor, windswept, harsh ridges like this one. So like beavers who build dams and establish wetlands, Nutcrackers can be seen... Is that a Nutcracker? Yeah, it is. Oh, come on. Frickin' Nutcrackers. All right, so like beavers who build dams and establish wetlands, Nutcrackers can be seen like environmental engineers, establishing islands of trees in oceans of rock. Many experts believe that these facilitate an entire ecological succession, starting with the shade from the needles that keeps snow from melting quickly during the summer and eroding away soil. So eventually, soil builds up, and that shade provides a protected environment for other species of trees and plants to grow. These islands expand and eventually create micro-ecosystems for all kinds of mountain creatures. But you'll find at the center of it all is the whitebark pines that started it. I was recently on a backpacking trip, and we happened to camp in one of these tree islands because it was simply the most hospitable place on the landscape by far. The vegetation kept us a few degrees warmer and protected us from the howling winds that we heard all night. If we lose whitebark pines, we'll lose many of these tree islands, and it's reasonable to imagine that the boundaries of these mountain forests may fall apart. Unfortunately, we are losing them, and we're losing them fast. This kind of site is far from rare. A 2016 survey showed that across the range of where it grows, over half of whitebark pines that are standing are now dead. Walking the high country, you'll find once great stands of whitebark pine have been reduced to silvery graveyards. And after mountains of research and recommendations from the topmost experts on this tree, in 2022, the whitebark pine was finally listed as federally threatened. But what is killing the whitebark pine? Some of the culprits include climate change, wildfire, mountain pine beetle, but the #1 threat to whitebark pines is actually a fungal tree disease called blister rust.
What is blister rust?
Yeah, so
This is Betsy Goodrich. She's a plant pathologist for the United States Forest Service, which means she lives and breathes tree diseases.
finding blister rust in the field was my first job. White pines and white pine blister rust have totally shaped my career. And white pine blister rust is by far my favorite disease, and the white pines are by far my favorite trees.
Quick explainer on the term white pines. They're a group of tree species, also known as five-needle pines, that blister rust just so happens to affect. So white bark pines, which is a species within the white pines, seemingly is the most affected by blister rust.
White pine blister rust is is a common name of a disease. And so the pathogen that actually causes the disease is named Crenartium ridicola. This particular pathogen was brought in on multiple shipments of seedlings that we did not know were infected at the time. And those seedlings were planted out in forests. We were moving around a lot of plant material in the early 1900s, and we would send seeds over to Europe, and they would grow seedlings for us and ship them back because people didn't necessarily know that they could carry some of those diseases. So why white pine blister rust has been so successful is because it's that introduced pathogen that the trees don't have a lot of defenses for.
How similar is the landscape of tree diseases to the landscape of human diseases? Like, are there a lot?
I really like that question. And the answer is yes, there are thousands and thousands of tree diseases out there. So pathogens tend to affect specific parts of the tree. So white pine blisterus, for example, is a stem rust because it gets on the stem and the branches. There's another group of thousands of species that we call like root diseases or root rots. We also have things like foliar pathogens that affect only the needles or the leaves of the trees. There's thousands of decay fungi that basically decay just the heartwood or just the sapwood of trees.
Okay, heartwood and sapwood. Quick explainer on that. This isn't totally common knowledge, but only the outer part of the trunk of the tree is actually alive, growing, and transporting nutrients, up to the leaves, down to the roots. That outer live part is called the sapwood, because it's like got sap in it. Meanwhile, the inner core of the tree is actually not alive anymore. It's just a structural element, kind of like how our fingernails are actually just made out of dead cells. That inner dead part is called the heartwood.
So you can have trees that live with heartwood decay and that are hollow for decades, for centuries. Some of our really old trees are probably hollow, and that's due to specific decay fungi.
Older trees are probably all riddled with various things. Is that what I'm...
Probably, yeah.
So unlike the landscape of human diseases, when you're a tree, if you get sick, the chances are you're probably sick for life with that. Yeah. But you can also seemingly probably live with that, especially because a lot of these are co-evolved.
Most of our tree diseases are caused by native pathogens. I get super excited about blisterus, so sometimes you just talk.
It's infectious, me too.
So it's hard to avoid getting various diseases if you're a tree. But just like for us humans, it's the new diseases that can be truly catastrophic. Blister rust is very new to whitebark pines, and the whitebark pines don't have good defenses for it. So once the fungus gets into the tree, what happens to the tree?
It basically has like a trauma in it, right? And so it's going to start like increasing cell division. You're going to start seeing swellings. It's going to start like traumatic resin development, and that's why you're going to start seeing pitching. It's essentially responding to that host as an invader. That's essentially breaking that outer bark, that periderm. And so that's exposing the tree to desiccation. And that's where the damage is really starting to occur, is when you break that outer barrier, which is the bark.
So one of the ways that it kills it is the tree reacts and its tissue kind of erupts, exposing it to drying out. The other way that it kills the tree is it basically just kind of cutting off circulation.
Yes. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's cutting off the circulation to that branch. Or if you think about it, if that happens to the stem, everything above the stem is going to die.
What is being done now to restore whitebark pines?
So the biggest component in restoration of white pine is to use those small amounts and low levels of natural genetic resistance in our favor. And so what we do is we go out and we scout stands and we find trees that are essentially free of blister rust. And then we collect cones and seeds from those trees. We run them through a resistance screening disease trial, use those seeds and just get more of that natural genetic resistance in those seedlings out on the landscape. That's the number one goal for restoration.
And this is where our bird best friend comes back into the picture. When the Forest Service goes out to plant these resistant trees, this kind of becomes a collaboration with the other species that plants whitebark pines out there, the Clark's Nutcracker. So I'm here in Washington State's Cascades Mountains because we need to know a lot more about the Nutcracker if we're going to save the whitebark pine. And I've been hired by a couple of researchers who are doing just that.
So you are already a little bit familiar with this story, but basically the Clark's Nutcracker is the only species which removes seeds whole from whitebark pine cones and then disperses them.
This is Taza Shamming and Alison Scoville, two wonderful researchers who found each other through their combined passion for conservation. They're also my new bosses.
Right now, there's a lot of different types of research going on with whitebark pines specifically. A big piece of the puzzle that we know very little about is Clark's Nutcrackers. We know very little about their habitat selection, their habitat use, their movement patterns, and just a lot of other pretty simple life history traits. Our overall goals of this project are to understand the drivers of Nutcracker occurrence But we also want to use this data on nutcrackers to help whitebark pine management plans by identifying and prioritizing areas for whitebark pine restoration. If managers know where nutcrackers are highly likely to be, they don't need to put as much time and effort into planting seeds. If there's seed sources in nutcrackers, there's a good chance the nutcrackers are going to go out and plant those.
So basically, we need to figure out where the nutcrackers are already hanging out and already planting seeds so that we can do our planting in complementary places and not be redundant to them. So here's what my quest is. I've been given a map with the locations of 22 remote audio recording stations spread all throughout the Cascades Mountains. I have to find each of these monitors, retrieve the data, refresh the batteries, and then take detailed notes on the state of the habitat around them so that later, Alison and Taza can compare that audio data listening for nutcrackers to the data on the habitat surrounding the monitors, searching for patterns that could be clues to where we should plant genetically resistant whitebark pines. Now, I've been getting outside a lot these past few years, but listening to the job description, I get a feeling this is going to take me well outside my comfort zone.
I think one of the most important things about taking on a job like this with us is that one has to be comfortable working by themselves. So you have to be comfortable working alone in the woods.
You probably will see nobody at all when you're up there. We have 22 monitors left to go. You have 12 to 14 days to do it. It'll be most efficient to have you camp out near the sites. So you'll be doing a lot of camping.
One has to be able to navigate through some pretty intense terrain sometimes.
You'll have GPS coordinates. So you'll need to be able to use that to navigate to them and find the monitors, which are intended to be a little bit not super easy to see. Then the hike will be anywhere from, just 500 meters or so to up to 8 miles or so. And you'll need to be able to carry probably 40 pounds or so on your back.
So you have to be fit. You have to be in great shape. And you have to be wanting and willing and able to climb mountains by yourself.
And have excellent judgment and risk assessment skills so that you can make good judgment calls about how to stay safe and also get the work done.
I've only ever camped by myself a couple of times, and it's been mentally kind of challenging. Nevertheless, I'm excited, one could say naively optimistic. What could possibly go wrong?
This morning, a trio of raging wildfires tearing through Washington state, killing at least one person and forcing thousands to evacuate. The great fire burning west of Spokane,
looking like air quality is purple. That's not good. Ooh, 295.
Well, we got totally socked in with smoke last night, so I'm not able to go up to the sites, but smoke got me thinking about fire, which got me thinking about serotinous pine cones. Serotinous pine cones are ones that have evolved to only open after fire. This is the cone of a lodgepole pine, and lodgepole pines dominate landscapes that have been recently burned. The reason is that some of their cones, probably not this one in particular, this is just a young one, but they look similar to the serotinous cones. They are glued shut with a kind of resin that is essentially melted by the fire, allowing the scales to part open and release the seeds only after fire. The regularly scheduled programming for a pine cone goes as follows. You have male cones and female cones on the tree. The female cones, which are the ones that you're used to, they're crunchy, they're big, they're what's gonna produce the seeds. And the small ones, which you see around, I'll throw a video up, those are what produce pollen. So wind brings the pollen from the male cones to the female cones, fertilizes the egg, and then over the course of, I think, 2 years, the seeds develop, in which time the cone also starts to mature. Now, in a normal cone, once it's matured, it opens and the seeds release. So this is a young one. This is one that I actually collected it when it wasn't open, but you can see it's actually starting to open here. And then here's one that is basically fully opened. That's why whitebark pines are weird. At some point in the evolutionary history of this tree, a mutation occurred that made it so that the pine cones didn't open. So considering that the whitebark pine cone doesn't open, it has to be opened by a Clark's nutcracker. I have some examples here that I picked up in the field of cones that have been forged by Clark's nutcrackers. This one, you can see it got in through the bottom and packed in and hollowed out the whole thing. This one has been totally forged out from the side here. You can even see some of the shells of the seeds inside. This one, and I love this one, you can see a nutcracker or nutcrackers got in it from this side, and from this side. But this one wasn't forged on by a nutcracker at all. This was foraged on by a squirrel. And you can tell it was foraged on by a squirrel because rather than being hollowed out from the inside, the core is still visible here. So what a squirrel will do, it'll grab the cone, go up on some kind of elevated surface, like a stump or a fallen tree, and then it'll pull the scales off and get at the seeds from the inside. They cache the seeds too, but they don't cache the seeds deep enough for the trees to grow. So now you can know by looking at the state of the whitebark pine cones on the ground whether the more dominant foraging in the area is squirrel or whether the more dominant foraging in the area is Clark's nutcracker.
All right, I'm really excited. I don't know if this is gonna work, probably is not, but this is my cone that was not open when I got it off the forest floor. And it occurred to me that while it was in the car, it might have heated up so much that that it started to open because I thought it was a fire. So I saw a guy's video where he put a serotinous cone in a microwave, and I'm gonna see if that works on this to open it. Maybe I'm just gonna make a fire in the house, we'll find out. There's no button for pine cone. All right, microwaving a pine cone. Oh my God, I think it's working. Oh my God, it's totally working. Oh my God, okay, all right. Wow. It's totally opening it, and you can see the resin on the outside. Is that the seeds? Oh, wow. And look at this. I think this is the seed that I couldn't find earlier. I think the seeds are popping out because it thinks that, oh my God, wait. Here we go, the seeds are coming out. That is so cool.
Oh yeah, I can totally see the mountains now. I think today's the day.
It's really important that I take advantage of this weather window because I don't know how long the smoke's gonna not be here. Checklist. First thing, I get there and I do the tree climb and switch out. I've got the 2 monitors, I've got my quick stick, I've got my harness. Okay, next. It's gonna be a delicate balance today between efficiency and speed and making sure I don't totally dehydrate myself because it's totally dry all 10 miles as far as I can tell. And I only have like 2 small water bottles and a bigger one. Well, I had a pretty good time getting up here. So it's only 2 o'clock. So what I have to do is change out that microphone up there using my little ladder and my harness, and then I'll walk in the northeast southwest directions from this tree, and I'll write down all the whitebark pine that I see, whether or not they have cones, whether or not they have blister rust. Unfortunately, it's looking like blister rust is pretty darn present here. You can see this tree is dead, and I can see the swelling that's characteristic of blister rust. And I was seeing it all on my way up here too. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. So if you're wondering what this is, it's called a quick stick, and it's for helping me climb trees. I was thinking I wouldn't need something like this, like, oh, I'll just grab the branches, but then you get up there and it's like, oh, I gotta change out this microphone, I need both of my hands. It's actually really nice to have this to stand on. So I'll show you how it works. Basically, it goes on the tree like this, and then you wrap this strap around the tree. Actually, it's hard on a tree like this. So you cinch the strap down, and it's kind of like magic. I mean, it really doesn't seem like it would work to just strap it in, but once it goes, you know, down a little bit, then you're pretty much good to go. This thing holds really, really well. You can just, up I go.
if you're able to hear that on the camera, but there's a bunch of mountain chickadees that are apparently not pleased with my presence, I think. You can hear them go, chickadee-dee-dee, which I think is their distress call. I think I was told by an ornithology professor that the number of D's in the chickadee-dee-dee-dee call is sort of equivalent to like the level of stress or like the level of danger that they're trying to communicate. There seem like there's not that many D's. I'm probably fine by them. Wouldn't be research without paperwork. Collect some information about the thing. Each one of these has a name, so we can keep track of everything. Monitor type and number. Oh my goodness. It's all coming apart. So now I just take down that same information for the one I'm putting up, and then I put it up. Whew. I'm almost to the second site now, and I thought that this would be a good opportunity to talk about something I noticed at the last site. We've got one of the pesky fires that's been generating the smoke that's been keeping me inside. We've got a nice white bark pine over here. So at the last site, what I think I'd noticed pretty definitively was that the white bark pines there weren't producing basically any cones. And that's a thing that white bark pines do. Sometimes all the white bark pines in an area produce cones, and then other years they don't. This is something called masting, and it's a result of the fact that so many creatures like to forage on white bark pine cones.
If white bark pine produced like a medium or good cone crop every year, the rodent populations, like the pine squirrel populations and everything else that eats those, will kind of increase to a point where they're consuming a lot of the seeds. So if the white bark pine has some years where they produce almost no seeds at all, those populations will crash, and then they can have like a bumper crop and totally overwhelm the predators that are there, so that all those seeds essentially can go to nutcrackers.
Wow. That you could really phrase that in a couple of ways, right? Like with so many creatures kind of relying on or foraging on these seeds, if there's like a period of time where they kind of starve the population a little bit, they're able to actually kill off enough stuff that they can that's kind of morbid.
And that's what happens with most masting pine trees. That's what so many masting trees are doing. It's not just the white bark pine, of course.
So it's a really common strategy.
What else does that? It's like lots of commercial tree nuts do this, right? Like,
oaks do for sure.
It's Douglas fir, ponderosa pine, limber pine, probably most pines.
If only small groups of white bark pine produced cones together, then all those seeds would get eaten. There's lots of creatures and not very many seeds. But if they all produce cones together at once, and that's what the masting is, then there's a much higher likelihood that some of those seeds don't get eaten. So going back to what I saw at the site, all I really found were old cones on the ground. I know that they're old because they're gray and they come apart easily, and pretty much all the cones that I saw showed signs of squirrel foraging, which we discussed earlier, where the scales have been plucked off individually as opposed to the cone getting hollowed out. So the fact that I'm only seeing squirrel foraging, and I haven't seen or heard any nutcrackers around here, makes me think that the nutcrackers know that this isn't a good place to get cones. But how do white bark pines all know to produce cones together? Are they all connected in some way such that they can all decide to do that together, or are they all reacting to some similar outside factor?
There's a whole body of literature out there on that, and short answer, no, we don't really totally understand.
Okay,
yeah, you could go do a PhD on that to try to figure out the actual answers. As far as I know, there isn't anything specific.
And that is that for today. Hopefully I get back to the car while there's still a little bit of light. Nope.
Good morning.
Today, I haven't totally decided, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna do the 14-mile round trip one. Big hike today, so I'm
excited and a little nervous. We'll see how this goes. Sun's not even on me fully yet. I'm already sweating. That's that. Time to head down. Just woke up. Yesterday was a very big day, so I don't know if I want to rest today or if I want to do the other site in this area. It's another 10-mile hike, or it's a 10-mile hike anyway. But a little bit less elevation gain than the last one, and I'm already here. It's like, I should just do it. So I'm a little less than halfway from the site, and I can already tell that blister rust is here. This is a really illustrative example of blister rust on a whitebark pine. It normally starts as just one branch like this. The fungal pathogen will enter the needles here.
Quick correction here. I thought the fungus was always entering at the branch tips, but actually it enters right by the swelling, or what's called a canker. From there, it spreads out in both directions, but ultimately moves towards the trunk. Now here's a tree that's a little further along in the disease's progression. I recognized the single dead branch and then followed that in to find the swelling. This disease has made its way to the main trunk, and that means everything above this swelling on the tree is going to die. Side note, we also noticed that a lot of these late-stage trees have the outer living wood, the sapwood, stripped off by animals, but this hasn't been studied to my knowledge.
Well, another day, another research site. Today I'm heading over to the mountains just east of Lake Chelan. It's the Chelan Sawtooth Wilderness, which I've never been to, so I'm really excited to see it.
Well, I didn't plan on sleeping in the car last night, but something came walking through my camp. Whatever it was not concerned with being quiet, but it was getting like right next to the tent. So worst case scenario, this could totally be like a person habituated bear that's looking for food at this camp because it's found food here before. So I am just stock still, like not even moving, like being so, so eventually it leaves. And there's always that period of time, like after something like that where you're like, okay, how long do I wait to go to the bathroom because I needed to pee really badly. And then after that, I just wasn't able to sleep again. It was like, I was just totally spooked. Solo camping is weird.
Kind of feel like a doctor in like medieval times during the Black Plague whose only job is to come to town and count the dead, just putting down more infected. It's kind of eerie to show up to a site where so much death has happened or is happening, It's funny, doing this alone, I get so many songs stuck on my head, and I'll be like the weirdest thing that triggers it. I was seeing a bunch of bees around at the last site. Oh, I got that oldie stuck in my head. Birds do it, bees do it, even educated fleas do it. Let's do it, let's fall in love.
So who all eats White Bark pine seeds besides the nutcracker? Well, for starters, finches, ravens, chickadees, grosbeaks, crossbills, woodpeckers, jays. Finches, ravens, chickadees, finches, chickadees, finches, ravens. Oh, holy mo- Finches, ravens, chickadees, crossbills, grosbeaks, nuthatches, woodpeckers, jays, chipmunks, squirrels, and bears. And that's just what we humans have observed. One could even say that the creatures of the mountains pine for these seeds. They're highly sought after and fought over. Squirrels bury them in caches, and then bears dig them up. Now, I think of bears as primarily meat eaters, but a 2003 Canadian study of the isotopes in bear poop showed that more than half the bears they were studying in a big cone year were getting over 50% of their protein from white bark pine seeds alone. Gotta hand it to those researchers for dedication. Even humans have gotten in on the bonanza. Interior Salish people would roast the seeds and grind them into flour. And that's because they are good eaten. They are over 50% fat by volume with ample carbohydrates and 16 critical amino acids. You could eat white bark pine seeds too if you could only find some. I think it says something that in my weeks out here, I have yet to find even one unforaged white bark pine seed.
This is easily the most mature white bark pine that I've seen at once. This is what it's like to walk through a thick grove of older white bark pine. Mature. One, two. North is that way. Are you from my transect? Rangefinder. I don't think he's happy with me being here. Sorry. Okay, day is done, and thank God, because I am hungry as hell. Woo-wee. That is all the sights in this area. Time to head out. Just had a cop zoom by, and I'm seeing smoke on the right-hand side of the road. Sure hope that I'm not seeing this on the news in, a day or so.
What have your experiences with nutcrackers been like as you've been out in the field, just observing them and enjoying them?
I got to know multiple nutcrackers really well through radio tracking. I think one of the biggest thing was just how different the personalities were. I and a few research assistants over those years followed the same birds around day after day after day throughout the year, some of them year after year. And some of them were really shy and would stay far away and would not come down very close to you. Other ones would completely ignore you and were pretty gregarious and seemed to have no problem at all, like flying down right in front of you and picking up insects or caching seeds. And we would be in the woods during the breeding season, which is when the nutcrackers behave so differently, because right now when the nutcrackers are out there harvesting seeds, they're loud, they're gregarious, they're squawking away, they're often traveling around in flocks, they're really busy. But a good part of the time, the rest of the year, they're much quieter, they're much harder to detect, but they also behave really differently. Often they'll have numerous different calls that people never even associate with nutcrackers. There's like the trill call and the bullfrog call and all these other calls that are typically considered part of courtship. And they just slow down quite a lot. They move a little bit differently because they're not at this like frantic pace that they're at during the fall. And then when they're with the young, it's really fun to watch watch them not only like feeding the babies once they're off the nest, like feeding the fledglings, but also getting to the point where they get annoyed and they get frustrated and they like peck at the fledglings and insist that they move away or basically like shove them off of pine cones and say like, okay, enough. And then like the fledglings, they'll see you in the woods oftentimes and they'll fly up and land on a tree branch right next to you and then like fall off. Or they'll follow you around from tree to tree for a little while, squawking at you. Like it's pretty interesting once you see these birds, like I said, day in, day out, and then also all these different ages in the same location, day in, day out, and just see how different they are.
And by the way, I think now is a perfect time to talk tree ID. You saw me get confused earlier, so how do you know that you're looking at a whitebark pine? To find a whitebark pine, the first thing you have to do is get really high, by which I mean 5,500 feet or more. That's usually where I start to see them. The next thing you gotta do is get dry. Whitebark pines don't like the moisture, and you'll typically find them on the eastern side of the Cascades, or just generally in the rain shadow of big ranges. In Washington, the trees that you're most likely to confuse the whitebark pine with are gonna be your ponderosa pines and your lodgepole pines. Particularly lodgepole pines can look almost the same at these elevations, but there's one foolproof method to know whether you're looking at a whitebark or a lodgepole, and that is by counting the needles. Pine needles grow in bunches called fascicles, and the number of needles in a fascicle can tell you a lot about the kind of pine it is. Lodgepoles have 2, ponderosas have 3, and the whitebark pine has 5. It's called the 5-needled pine. The only other 5-needled pine in this area is the white pine, but those grow a little lower and they have these huge telltale cones. Another solid line of evidence to use is to look under the tree for cones or cone scales. This only works if the tree is mature because the younger ones don't produce cones, but it can be really helpful, especially if you're having trouble counting those needles.
This is it. This is the last site. The whitebark pine here is really healthy. Normally in a cluster of 3 like this, I'd expect to look inside and see all kinds of cankers and weeping and so on. There is this, but that seems to be from something else. I don't know what. Otherwise, everything looks pretty up. Well, okay. Can't get too excited. So what I'm doing is just going in a circle and systematically checking each whitebark pine that I see for cones. Healthy sapling, very nice. This is no good. You can even see the white blisters on it. And that is a pretty darn nice end to a transect, especially my last transect. I've been doing this whole thing so fast, I haven't really gotten a chance to reflect on it, but I did like a sort of rough calculation of how many miles I've traveled. And I think it's somewhere between 500 and 700. 50 or more of that was on foot. When I hit the sleeping pad, I'm just out like that. You know, when I was first couple of nights, I'd be tossing and turning for a while before I could fall asleep. Backpack doesn't feel like as much of a burden anymore. Coming down off of a 10-mile hike, my legs aren't really feeling it as much anymore. My enthusiasm has definitely been low sometimes, like when I'm coming down off of a ridge and there's no light left and I know I'm gonna be making chili in the dark for the 3rd night in a row and then doing the whole, you know, thing again tomorrow. But overall, it's just been so good. I don't know how much I'm even really looking forward to getting back to real life, you know? So I've essentially gone out and collected weeks and weeks of audio from these sites, and I have collected a bunch of habitat data. What happens now with that data once it gets entered? What do you guys do with it then?
We have about 6,000, I did those numbers before, about 6,600 days of data, days of audio data from the first 3 years. And with your help, we will probably have about 3,000 more days this year. So we have almost 10,000 days of data. And what we're working hard on right now, we are working with BirdNet, which is an automatic detector that was created by Cornell, to figure out how to best use it to extract presence absence of nutcrackers calls. So basically we're going to come up with, for now, presence absence of nutcrackers per day per site. And then we're going to take that and we're going to plug it into occupancy surveys with all the habitat data and basically run some models to figure out, are nutcrackers more likely to be present as a function of all these white bark pine characteristics, stand density, cone crop, et cetera, and all these other habitat variables, as well as are they more likely to move into a site based on one or more of these variables? And then are they likely to move out of a site based on these variables?
And how many years left do you picture in that process?
So this is the 4th year of data collection. And so right now we are on a mission to fully analyze this data and get a manuscript out this winter. And both Ali and I will be able to focus a lot of our time in it. So it's going to be possible. But in an ideal world, we're looking at this as a long-term project. I think one of the biggest problems with science is that there's not a lot of long-term projects. I had a conversation with a couple of older scientists at one point. I remember them saying, you either need to study something for 2 years or you need to study it for 20, because you can get great lines on a graph in 2 years and great lines on a graph in 20, but everything in between is all up and down. We also plan for this project to evolve, potentially branching into working with citizen scientists so that we have a lot more help out there in the field. We're not just going to go to these 30 permanent sites year after year after year. We've already started a pilot project working in recent fire footprints, and we may end up pivoting a little bit and focusing on that fire piece. So using all of these pieces that we've learned, all the results that we've learned, to focus on these fire footprints, because fire is such an issue right now. Like, there's so many huge fires that are increasing in frequency and intensity right now, especially in the Pacific Northwest, while also continuing monitoring these permanent sites for the long-term data. But long answer, a long time, ideally many years to come, ideally until we both retire. We'll see, one step at a time.
So if you're feeling inspired to go do some science about this, there actually are some great ways to get involved. Alison and Taza are still working on ways to get people involved in a citizen science aspect with their project, but the White Bark Pine Ecosystem Foundation has a citizen science project already in motion. I'll put a link to that below. Citizen scientists and general outdoor enthusiasts use an app called iNaturalist to document rare and notable observations of living things out in nature. So if you like to hike where it's high and where it's dry, you can use your newfound or maybe not so newfound white bark pine ID skills with iNaturalist to help scientists get a better idea of where white bark pines are growing. Multiple experts I've talked to have told me that the current maps that we have of where white bark pine grows are not as accurate as they'd like them to be, because we don't have enough data. I feel like I started this project a lifetime ago. When I see a twisted old white bark pine, I think about the generations upon generations of nutcrackers who have been storing the seeds of this grandmother tree and planting whole forests in the process. I'm so grateful to Alison and Taza for this opportunity.
I'm just so
awesome.
grateful that this happened when it happened. This was a really, really good opportunity for me. Going out there.
Perfect for us.
Yeah, it was a really
phenomenal job. Yeah.
Learning this story has radically changed the way that I see these high mountain landscapes, and that's what I do this for. I hope this video has done the same for you. And as always, thanks for watching.